Since yesterday afternoon, my son has been asking for Indian food tonight, like every 10 minutes. Are we going to have Indian food tomorrow night? I say, sure. And then he goes and turns on the TV and he says, can we watch like Shah Rukh Khan singing and dancing? He's like a Brad Pitt of India. I say, sure. And then he says, so Dad, when you were in India, what exactly did you do? So everything revolves around India. My experience with him is that when he's had like 5 or 6 tablespoons of chicken tikka masala and rice and bread, his plate is half full. He just leaves it. He says, I'm full. I just spent like $100 on this food and finish it. No, I'm full. Or he comes home to me and says, Dad, I'm in love with this girl. I can't stop thinking about her. I says, oh, okay. And so he comes home a few days ago and says, so how's that girl? We had sex. I no longer think about her. Oh. Well, why? I'm satisfied. And it's an interesting phenomenon. It's kind of like reading the book of Job. Your father just died, your mom just died, your life is just turned upside down, and you don't know why you're suffering so much, and there is just so much hunger inside you to understand. And then you read the book of Job, and it seems like all the dots connect so wonderfully to one another. And then you walk away after like a few hours, say, I understand why I must suffer now, why my life is this way. And then, because the book left such a wonderful impression on you, you're just bored, silly. You say, oh, maybe I should pick up the book of Job. But it no longer has the same effect because you no longer approach it with the same pain. You're in a place of privilege. And in all those examples, what they have in common is that there is a state of hunger, and that hunger is a driving force. The more you have hunger, and the more difficult it is to satisfy it. It's not very difficult to satisfy your hunger of listening to Snoop Dogg. But it's more difficult to figure out, why did Michael Jackson go through all these physical transformations? What's going on inside his psyche? What happened in his childhood? And all of a sudden you realize, well, yeah, you can listen to, say, They Don't Care About Us, which is a beautiful piece of music. And 10 times after you say, no, I think I'm done with that. And that may take a week or two, but coming to understand why, he went through all these physical transformations, that may take you a lifetime, because you have to figure out what lives inside him, you have to figure out what abuse is, how it impacts us, you have to understand why fathers abuse their kids, what happened to his siblings. I thought that family is supposed to be like a supportive unit, and yet everybody abandons everyone. And you realize that you were interested in Michael Jackson and his physical transformation, but all of a sudden you spend the past 5 years understanding parental abuse and its impact on children's psyche. And after a while, a friend of yours comes to you and says, so what are you doing? I'm reading a book about child abuse. Child abuse? I thought you were doing a project on Michael Jackson. I am. But in order to understand what the hell is going on inside his head, I have to go and do this first. And you realize that as your hunger has more depth, it becomes more difficult for it to be satisfied. Now, what is interesting about Siddhartha is the following, and that is a common theme, whether you're talking about Jesus or Moses or Muhammad or Lao Tzu or the Buddha or Malcolm X or Martin Luther King Jr. or Mahatma Gandhi. All people, what they have in common is a tremendous amount of privilege. Now, one of the things that privilege does is the following. If your parents have always loved you, you're never going to seek therapy. Why? Because your parents are right there, your grandparents are right there, your siblings are right there. Whenever there's an issue, you go and talk to them. If you have friends, as we did back home, from one end of the street to the other end, you just went into the street and you would scream, Amir is out, and all of a sudden 50 kids would jump, and then we would play soccer for like the next 10 hours. So you would never experience depression or loneliness. And that's one of the things about privilege. So what you have in the story of Siddhartha is, he doesn't have any physical issues. In other words, he's not sick. He doesn't have a headache. And so he has a very healthy physical body. And that means that he doesn't need to spend time thinking about his physical issues, because there is none. My sister-in-law, which is my brother's wife, she was always, or has been always, careful about what she eats. But when she got diagnosed with cancer 4 or 5 months ago, the chemo, the radiation, the pills she has to take, the uncertainties of the future, about her life, about her physical body, about death, about the people she may have to leave behind because if the cancer is not cured. And you realize that all of her mental space is occupied with, I have cancer, what the hell do I do with it? You don't sit and talk about God, that's stupid. God can't do anything. Kaiser can, but not God. And such physical ailments, regardless of how spiritual you may be, for us commoners, you will eventually come down like an aeroplane and you say, okay, where do I need to go to fix this? We had a friend, she was diagnosed with breast cancer, stage 4. She went to England, this is the 1970s. She went to England, no cure. She came to America, no cure. And she was young, but she was told that there is this strange fellow in India and he has miraculous powers and all she has to do is just go and visit him and he has powers to heal. Now, for those of us who just live amongst commoners, such things are just mere fantasies, they're like hocus pocus, they're like Harry Potter. You can only see such things in movies. And when you're desperate, you have no idea what you're capable of doing. Like when you're desperate to صد فصل بهار آید و بیرون ننهم گام ترسم که بیایی تو و در خانه نباشم. That I am so desperate in wanting to see you that I'm just not going to leave the house, just in case, by chance, you have this desire to knock on my door, and you in fact do knock, but I'm not there. And then you just leave a note. I came by, you weren't here. And they say, man, that sucks. I've been waiting for like 5,000 years. She doesn't show up. I just go to pee, she shows up, and then she leaves. Or he. So if you're really, really desperate, you believe in all sorts of things, okay? So this woman was really, really desperate. So she said, oh, well, they say there is this guy with some powers. Let me just go. So she goes, and she thinks that he's just like some tiny guy sitting in a room. He can knock on the door, and she can knock on the door and enter. And she goes to visit him. There is this huge line of people desiring to receive his gifts, what in Persian Arabic we call barakat, a blessing that comes from someone who has to someone who doesn't. But barakat basically means like someone kind of gives you a gift that no other person can. I mean, imagine you go home and you YouTube Martin Luther King's dream speech, or you watch this movie that came out in the 1970s, Jesus of Nazareth, with Robert Powell, he's English. Just the way he is, just the way he just plays this Jesus part, which is like almost a 7-hour movie. And the way he talks about the Beatitudes, the way he deals with the Pharisees, and the way he fights them, just the way he is, and you say, well, I want to see that in my instructors. I want to see that in my friends, but no one can. So you keep watching, Robert Powell on the big screen because there's just something about the way he just acts. And you're just like glued to your seat, you're mesmerized. That's it. That's what we call a blessing, a barakat. No one else can inspire those emotions about you except this person. And when you listen to Martin Luther King's dream speech, it may have been rehearsed, who the hell knows, but just the way he speaks it, with the passion, with the pain, with the history of America, with the pain of his people, you sit back and something about you just kind of comes to life. It's like God looks at this dust, breathes his own spirit, and all of a sudden says, in you I have hidden my own image, but it's going to be covered with an avalanche of garbage. I mean, if you examine what you and I do throughout the day, it's just garbage filled with nonsense. And it takes Martin Luther King's speech 12, 13, 14 minutes for all this nonsense to go away. It's like a vacuum cleaner. And then you receive the blessing. And then you shut off your laptop or TV, you go for a walk, and you're just thinking and reflecting and feeling, and you walk certain parts of Oakland and say, why is there poverty? Why is there homelessness? Now, you have been a complete, dumb blonde for the past, many centuries of your life, but for the first time, this blessing given to you by Martin Luther allows you to come to life and think about life in a completely different way. So, since Siddhartha has no physical pain, he doesn't have to think about his body. He loves his father, he loves his mother, he loves his people. So, there is no poverty in the realm of love. He has them. He knows what they look like. He knows that whenever, for example, he has a flu, his mother makes him soup. His father sends him someone to give him a massage. And he knows that whatever happens to him, his parents are there as a support system. Well, that's another privilege in the realm of emotions now. Then, when he is young and he's curious about the meaning of life, if there is God, if there is this, if there is that, he goes to his father, who happens to be an intellectual. He has read the Bible inside and out. So, Dad, who am I? Son, you were created by the gods. Son, something happened in the Garden of Eden. You were not supposed to do it, but you did it. You went against God's commandment, and it's your punishment down here. Sweat, blood, toil. Life is not meant for you to be happy. It's struggle, and it never ends. From the moment you open your eyes to the time you die, you're always pursuing something. And for the longest time, he was satisfied with the intellectual nourishment given to him by his father. And all of us, defend our ridiculous positions in life. I am a Muslim. Should you say anything negative about Muslim, I will slit your throat. I'm a Christian, and Jesus Christ is ABCD. I'm a Buddhist, and you can't talk badly about the Buddha. I worship him. I've had many students from Tibet, and they worship the Dalai Lama. He's like a reincarnation of the Buddha. And sometimes I say some of the things that he says is stupid. It makes no sense. And they come to me after class. I mean, these like nuns and monks who eventually drop my classes and go away. And all of us defend the position. Now, I wasn't there when Jesus was alive. I don't even know who the hell wrote those books. I mean, St. Paul has written 15 books of the 27 books of the New Testament. This is the guy who never saw Jesus, never broke bread with him. And yet, I say, oh, well, he had a couple of visions. And then he was inspired to write. But inspiration and revelation are two completely different things. You and I are inspired all the time. You see a homeless man, you're inspired to bring about justice, and then it disappears. That's what inspiration is. Revelation is transformative. It removes you from your flesh. You're no longer the same person. And so there is something about us that struggles to be free from the cage of ideas and beliefs, from a life that clips our wings. Now, one of the nice things about Siddhartha, which in Sanskrit means, the name Siddhartha means someone who's basically focused on physical pleasures and who pursues physical pleasures. Jesus is just Jesus. When he receives barakat or blessing, then he is Christos, he's Christed. Before that, he's just an ordinary guy. And so there is this thing about him that says, I have heard all the stuff. Sometimes the things I hear that have to do with philosophy and religion, they're inspiring and exciting. But it's like you read all these books about love. And you say, God damn it, I want to sit by the phone for hours waiting for this person to call me. I can't feel that through reading books. I want to be infected with all these ideas that I read. How do I do that? Now, some of us we have this desire, but it's never satisfied, and we easily forget about it. Siddhartha is a different story. He says, you know what? I am healthy. I just don't want to play soccer anymore, and I don't want to play tennis anymore, and I don't want to go hiking anymore. My body has taken me to enough places to realize I no longer desire to go where my body wants to take me. Emotions. The feelings I get by eating chocolate ice cream, beautiful. The feelings I get by dancing, beautiful. The feelings I get by reading the book of Job, beautiful. But, these feelings are like having an orgasm. They come and they go. I want something that's solid, that's something that never leaves me. Everything I touch after a few weeks turns into dust. Is there anything I can hold on to that doesn't disappear? That life doesn't come by and steal it? Remember the saying in one of the Gospels, do not store your treasures down here? And what is a treasure really? But whatever it is that you value, be it your boyfriend, be it your girlfriend, your glasses, the Bible, the Quran, it doesn't really matter what the hell it is. As long as you're attached to something, you will do whatever you possibly can to protect it. But what you're missing is time will eventually force you to lose interest. It's not even up to you. The book of Job may be good when your father has passed, but when you're happy, satisfied, enjoying your friends, you don't care about suffering. And even though you may long to read the book of Job because you're just done with your friends, you realize so many of intellectual components about you need to come together to be able to receive the barakat or the blessing from the book of Job. A man who has everything, but because he has potential, he needs to be tested and he needs to fail again and again and again and again until he falls into chronic depression where he says, I want to die. And then what you have is people like us telling him, oh no, God is great. This is happening for a reason. Well, fuck you. Nothing is happening for a reason. I am the one who's suffering. What the hell do you know? My dad just died. Your dad is alive. You don't know about pain. Don't preach to me. You know, I remember Dick Cheney and it was a vice presidential debate some years ago. And you know, Republicans are really gung-ho about saying awful things about homosexuality and transgender and all those things. And they're having a debate on the stage. And I forget who the vice president was for the Democratic Party. He looks at Dick Cheney and says, well, I know Dick Cheney's daughter is gay, and I respect Dick Cheney. And he said a couple more things, and the commentator looks at Dick Cheney and says, well, do you have anything to say? And he says, I appreciate what my opponent said about my daughter and myself. Thank you very much. Now, all the time before that, he would come on the stage, Dick Cheney would, and say awful things about homosexuality. But when it touches himself, when it touches his daughter, he remains silent. That's what happens when something touches you, not just intellectually. You realize that this rug under your feet have been pulled away, and it's just a black hole, and there is no end to it, and there is no light. What you have is a man who says, I have no use of my physical body. It can't take me anywhere. I just can't have fun with it. And you say, you know what is the world of emotions but quickies in moments of inspiration? That's what they do. You con yourself, manipulate yourself, lie to yourself, deceive yourself, and you place your physical body in certain environments to get an emotional erection. And then emotionally you begin to masturbate. And then you reach climax. And then you say, well, I am done with this party. I am done with this conversation. It was good, but I'm no longer interested. Then you take your sorry behind home and you say, man, that was a complete waste of time. And then you realize all these books, they're bumper stickers. Socrates, an unexamined life is not worth living. Really? Are you serious? Do you know what happens when you examine your beliefs? Do you examine when you realize how incompetent you are? Do you examine and see how many gaps and holes live inside your belief system? How do you live with that? You are far better remaining unexamined and remaining your beliefs unexamined, because at least you believe. You hold something sacred. Do you really think that married people look at each other and aggressively examine the nature of their relationship? No, it'd be devastating. That's the cruelest thing you can do, unless you have fallen in love with another, or unless you're just depressed and sad and angry because you realize that life has shortchanged you. This is not what you signed up for. You signed up for love, and the only thing you have is a prison system. And so Siddhartha comes to realize there is nothing, and which is such a sad thing. Life is huge. The world is beautiful. There are all these people we call diversity, inclusion, perspectives. You can learn from all sorts of people. But he has lost interest in everything. I mean, talk about chronic depression. And the only thing that's left is, you know what? There are some monks out there in that monastery, or some nuns in a convent somewhere. Well, why are they there? Well, they're there because they were after wisdom. Why didn't they come back to life? Because they realized life is not worth living. It's much better to live in a convent than Oakland. What's the use of hanging out with like 5,000 useless people, having neighbors who never get visitors? They're all depressed. And when you talk to someone, they want to talk about booze and Miley Cyrus. What sort of a life is that? So they stay in the convent. So he says, you know what? Maybe I should go pay them a visit. Maybe I should become like them. And then he comes to realize that even religious people deceive themselves very much like people who are on the outside. C.S. Lewis, a long time ago, wrote a book called The Screwtape Letters. And one of the best pieces of that book is where the devil looks at his nephew, who is soon to take over. He says to him, you don't need to tempt people who believe. We have won them over. They live their life without really examining them. Let them believe in their Jesus Christs. Let them believe in their Mohammeds. Let them believe in their Buddhas. Leave them alone. The people you need to deceive and focus on are people like Socrates who go around telling people, examine, doubt, don't trust, don't love, first test. Those are the people, because these are the people who are fighting to destroy the status quo. Do you know how difficult it was for the Catholic Church to burn all these other Bibles, canonize them? No different than Trump, eradicating this department and that department. And I'm not saying it's a bad thing, because not all of us can be a Buddha, not all of us can be a Malcolm X. Regular people like me, we just want to believe in some goddamn thing out there. Because I don't want to drown in sadness. I don't want to drown in meaninglessness. I want to believe in some goddamn thing out there to give my life some purpose. I don't love my boyfriend, but without him, I wouldn't like loneliness. And it's such a difficult place to be, because you walk into this uncertainty. You know, none of us in this class desire to have no power in life. You know, I remember when I would go to Hussein's house, sometimes you would go into your teacher's house with like emotions you don't really understand, but they're just very, very intense. And you're there trying very hard to hold yourself together, you know, not to cry, not to scream, not to express anger. And so we're sitting on the sofa, the three of us, and then Hussein walks in. And then Hussein is always in like this very, very focused, intense, specific mood. He's always been. And so you don't want to lose control. In other words, you don't want him to look at you or for you to look at him, because you know you're going to break down. And breaking down is like a very private moment. And there is your friend Mehrdad, there is your other friend Hussein, and these are like your brothers. You've been around them for like 20, 30, 40 years. And you don't want them to see you in such a vulnerable moment. And so Hussein looks at you and says, Amir, how you doing? Just don't want to look into his eyes, because you know you're going to break down. And so you mumble, I'm doing fine, Hussein, thank you very much. Anything new? No, nothing is new. And you say, and it's because you just don't want to lose control. You don't want to lose power. What little power you have. Now that power that you're holding on to may be completely dysfunctional, but it is something that you still can grab on to. I mean, look, the Gospel of Mark, there is no virgin birth in it. He doesn't say, I am God. He doesn't say, I am bread. He doesn't say, I am light. He doesn't say, only through me. You have a gospel in which all of his disciples just don't understand him. You know who understands him? Centurion, a Roman guard, the devil, and 3 women near the end of the book. The last 12 verses which were added much later to the book. Now, if you were to exercise some intellectual honesty, you would say, man, the virgin birth is like the cornerstone of Christianity. Why doesn't Mark have it? Because it wasn't written by a guy who was interested in that. It wasn't written by a guy who lived in a community who believed in virgin births. Now, what are you going to do? What, you're going to denounce your faith? Of course not. You're not going to do any of those things. You're going to say, you know, Amir Sabzavari is a dick. He doesn't know what the hell he's talking about. I'm not going to listen to him anymore. In fact, I'm going to drop the class. And you don't do it because you're crazy. You don't drop the class because you're stupid. You do it because you want to hold on to your belief. And it's good. And it's good because in moments of crisis, you can walk your ass into the church and pray. Your belief saves you. It may not be real, but it saves you nevertheless. Siddhartha has nothing. His body is useless. And if you lock your body in like a tiny dark room, well, what sort of emotions are you going to get? There's no Beyonce there. There's no peach coffee there. There's no lake there. There's no sun there. There's nothing there. It's just all doom and gloom. And you look at other people taking classes, writing essays, pursuing goals. And at moments you say, man, I want to have a desire. I want to have a goal. I want to enjoy sex. I want to drink. I want to have friends. But you say, you know, I've been there. I've done that. Even though I want to go out there and drink, I know the outcome. And it's like you become a fortune teller. You have access to the future. All things that you touch will eventually turn into dust. But before they do that, they will take your time, your money, your youth. And in the end, you're left with what? Nothing. You spend thousands of dollars on your wedding ceremony. And in the end, you have a video. And you watch it. Then you look at your husband. And you're disgusted by the life the both of you have created. You have kids. They're just junky. You go to school, you pay all this money, you have a PhD, and then you hit midlife crisis and you say, man, I wasted all that time, all that energy, nothing. And the Buddha says, I've been there, I've done that. I mean, you have to understand how profound the story of Jesus Christ is that a guy doesn't need to wait till in his midlife, 40 or 50 or 60 or 20. He says, you know what? Life is fucked up. And he gets this at the age of 12. He doesn't talk Snoop Dogg. He doesn't drink. He doesn't smoke. He says, when you take me to Jerusalem, you're going to find me in my Father's temple. And you know what I'm going to talk about? God. And you have to understand how devastating it is for a 12-year-old. People play soccer. They play video games, but not this kid. He doesn't get a chance to be a child. He's like under an avalanche of all the serious questions. And then, of course, you have the Gospel of Judas, who says, you know what? I don't want to talk anymore. I don't want to see anyone anymore. Kind of like Freud, who brings in the couch to his office and he says, you know what? I just don't want to look at people. They disgust me. I like to listen to the stories, but I don't want to look at them. I've heard them all. I just want to hear them and imagine that they're like a puzzle and try to piece this puzzle together. And so he comes to realize, the Siddhartha does, that the monks deceive themselves very much like all the other people under the sun. He leaves everything. He leaves everyone. And then he runs into the Buddha. Imagine you run into Jesus Christ. But you know that if Jesus was to give you like a nugget of wisdom, well, what is that going to do for you? Inspire you for what, 10 minutes, 20 minutes, 30 minutes, 5 days, a month, and then what? Whatever wisdom he gives you, for you, it lives in the hands of time. What's going to happen? Eventually, it's going to fade. The intensity is going to go. Then you're just left with a bumper sticker. You know what Siddhartha does, which is very interesting? Looks at Jesus and says, you know what? I don't want to follow you. What I want from you is the following. When you left your parents, and for 18 long years you roamed the world, you went to Persia, Egypt, India, and you served under all these different teachers, you must have experienced something, like an opening of sorts. You know, it's like someone asking you, so you fell in love and you had sex with your companion and it was your first time, tell me, how was it? And you try to use words and he says, tell me exactly what happened and how it felt. I want that feeling. Say, it doesn't fit language. I don't know what to tell you. He says, you're useless. And he says, I don't want your words. Tell me what exactly that opening looked like. How did God's face look like? Was he white? Was he black? Was he blue? Was he a man, a woman? Somewhere in between? Was he a nothing? Don't preach to me about wisdom. I want that which you experienced. And Jesus says, I can't do that. All I can tell you is give you these nuggets until these nuggets infect you. Then you will go into this dark hole and then you get really, really depressed. And in your depression, only two options. You will either get something or you will get nothing. It's a risk you take. And you know, it's kind of like that scene in the movie The Matrix where Morpheus offers him the red and the blue pills. He says you can take the blue pill and you can wake up in your bed and you can think whatever you want to think. You can be the same old person. Be a Christian or a Buddhist or a Muslim, a man or a woman, whatever. If you take the red pill, on the other hand, I will show you how deep the rabbit hole goes. And the problem with the rabbit hole is that there is no light there. All you have is uncertainty, a future that is unknown to you. But because you know what metacortex looks like, that's the company in which you work. Something that's situated behind your brain, governs every part of who and what you are. All of your desires, nothing belongs to you. I mean, consider if you were born in the Middle East, you would be a Muslim, not a Christian. Out of all the sperms moving through the fallopian tube for your mother, if instead of sperm A, sperm B reached the egg, you would be a completely different human being. You wouldn't be you today. Most of who and what we are quite accidental, manufactured by this company we call metacortex. Thomas Anderson is tired of playing this stupid game. He lives alone and he lives in rooms 101. And there is a reason, because 0 and 1, off and on, that's what the student falls into, the conflict. You're on, you think, you reflect. There is, those in this class who enjoy such ideas, read the Gospel of Thomas. It's like the third line in the book. Seek and you shall find. When you find, you'll be troubled. Well, what do you mean troubled? Well, troubled is a set of feelings and emotions. And you say, I don't want trouble. It takes power away from me. I can't enjoy my wife, my kids, my life. I don't want to think. And so that's where Thomas Anderson is. And whenever you live in conflict, I don't care if you have a boyfriend or 1,000 of them, you're always going to be alone in conflict. Pain forces you into loneliness, and there is no escape from it, unless you go into off mode. Now, in numerology, you must always end up with a single digit, unless you're dealing with master numbers. So you add 1 plus 0 plus 1, you get 2. 2 is a number for contamination, corruption, pollution. 2 is also the number for society. Imagine you come to realize everything about society is just garbage. Where are you going to go? What are you going to do? Even when he has fun, when he's told to follow the white rabbit, he goes into this club. He doesn't mingle with anyone. He stands in the corner. He doesn't talk to anyone. And that's what happens when you have a conflict that's intense and lives inside your soul. Psyche, Greek for soul. So the whole thing is a mystery. And I go back to something I've always believed, which is, I think if education, which means to bring out, that's what education means, that if teaching and learning were simple things, if they were easy, Muhammad would not need to fight almost 40 battles. Moses didn't have to go against the wishes of Pharaoh and fight him and drown his soldiers and eventually abandon his people. Jesus didn't have to convince his disciples all the time. And what you realize is that teaching this red pill to anybody, first it depends what the teacher has to offer. Then it also depends on the readiness of the student and how much they're willing to sacrifice. And the only way you'll make any sacrifices is that if you really enjoy the person who has the red pill. If you don't like Morpheus, you're not going to go visit him. You don't really care what he has. So there has to be this attraction. And that attraction is a mystery. How it happens, why it happens, who the hell knows?